Waheguru Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Gurinder Paul Singh. I am your host for JMC Chronicles, episode 6. This episode, we are joined by the wonderful Harveen Kaur. We are going to talk. We're going to be talking about a lot of core empowerment and how building spaces and safe spaces, especially for our up and coming cores and even the cores of nowadays, to be able to be in those spaces and being able to express themselves without trying to be like vulnerable or any sense of trying to be not themselves while they're trying to get in those spaces. Harveen Kaur is our Kern County community organizer for Jakara movement. I'll let her introduce herself a little bit more, but
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Gurinder. I really, really appreciate it. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and really appreciate you, Gurinder Paul, for having me as a guest. Very, very honored to be here, and nice to just finally like get looped into the podcast. I feel like I'm living a dream. Um, really, just excited to be here. I mean, your JMC is always killing it, especially with this podcast. Some great content always being pushed out. So really just like thank you so much. And a little introduction about myself. I was born and raised in Bakersfield, California. My name is Harveen Kaur, pronoun she, her, hers. And yeah, after growing up in Bakersfield, I grew up on the east side, so I was always craving that sangat. And I guess in college, then when I decided to attend UCI to further my education and my studies, that's when I really just jumped in head first into community and like all these other organizations that could just get me connected to our Sangat members. And yeah, from there, I was introduced to Jakara and I barely missed it in Bakersfield. And I unfortunately, but it's okay because I got to join in college and attended Lilgar 2017. And that's when my whole like world just changed. I was exposed to so many amazing people and just had these intellectual conversations with a bunch of my peers from all over California and was just able to take all of everything that I learned back to my campus. And so it was with my fellow Kaurs, Gurjeev Kaur and Harman Bagri, that I was able to, we were able to start our own JMC UCI chapter there. And so really just humbled to be here. That's a little bit about myself and my college experience with JMC. I know Jaskeet Kaur, who's also on our staff now, likes to call us like JMC veterans. So if y'all ever need anything like in terms of JMC, I got y'all. And yeah, now I'm working as the Kern County Community Organizer for Jakara Movement and very, very humbled just to be doing this seva for our community in Sangat. And yeah, thank you for having me here. That's me in a
no.
nutshell.
No, thank you so much. I mean, I always say this to all of our guests, but you guys are truly what makes this podcast what it is. You guys just coming on and being a guest, giving you guys time, and just having these conversations is just amazing time. And I can't thank you guys all, and thank you for joining today.
Of course.
Um, yeah, so the JMC podcast, the JMC Chronicles, we are, again, you can find the video version here on YouTube. Again, you can just go on YouTube, look up the JMC Chronicles, and we should pop up. We are the first link that pops up. Then you can also find us for the non-visual version, just the audio version on Spotify, Apple Music, and Google Podcasts. So if you don't want to watch the video and you just want us playing in the background or having our podcast on the background, for feel free, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts. Again, just type in the JMC Chronicles. The links will be in the YouTube description, so please check it out if you always want to have the non visual version to listen to it at your time. Um, this, like I said, is our 6th episode. I can't thank you guys so much for being and creating the sanghas that we have right now. Our YouTube is going strong, or even our on our all of our platforms is going
We have a
fine.
guest. I'm so sorry. This is my Dadima.
ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਜੀ
Sasri Ka bulaunde si.
Sastrikal.
We have a guest.
it's always amazing to have guests, you know. The more the merrier, right? I always say this is our first podcast with only a single guest, but now we just had a guest cameo, right? It's always amazing to have those type of things.
Yeah, the realities of living in a Punjabi household, right?
Yeah. I mean, I so far in all of our episodes, this I am in a different room, but my door has never been opened in the middle of an episode. But I'd have no doubt if we keep going, that door will open eventually, and somebody will walk through that door.
Yeah.
But going more back into it, so I talking a little bit how I met Harveen. We again, we were talking a little bit before we were catching up, but I had seen Harveen and we had met a little bit back in Lakar 2018 in Bakersfield, right?
Yeah.
I I've been vocal of how much I don't like the area of Bakersfield, but I love the people. But I do love Bakersfield. I'm coming around, right? Manu can tell you that she has converted me into a Bakersfield lover. As much as you want to believe her or not, that's on you. But I always said that Bakersfield always has the best people, and that's like the more people I meet from Bakersfield, the more that statement becomes more true, right?
Oh,
Um,
but
but again, like I said, like just we were talking about a little bit, like seeing how you carry yourself as being a gore in the situations, and just being a little bit more like here in America, and seeing how gore involvement is a little bit like put to the back burners in majority of the times, right? Yeah, like this is something that's been in the our culture for a long time, right? It's always like typically it's like always the husband and then the wife is usually underneath or beneath it. It's very messed up, and it shouldn't be like that, right? And it's
yeah.
unfortunately that's those, and it's not even just husband and wife, that carries into almost every single type of thing, right? Like the one of the
Mhm.
biggest things that makes me like super upset and super sad about it is like when families have their first child and it becomes, and they've come to know that it's a girl, like they'll actually cry and be like sad that it's a girl, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just like not celebrating that you had a child. Instead, you're crying and stuff because it's a girl. And it's just like I'm like why? Like I just don't like that kind of like those type of things are just ingrained into like our culture. And I'm
Mhm.
so happy for gores like you, especially like you guys are out there, you guys are carrying yourselves, you guys are being able to show other gores that are growing up here in America that it is possible to be a leader and become that person to where you can stand on your own and you don't have to be labeled as somebody's sister, somebody's friend. Like it's you or you, right? And that's something that I admire, and I'm so amazed that we are working towards that, right? Every day we're still working towards that. So
Yeah.
one of the first things I wanted to talk about with you was like being a core, and you said you grew up in the east side of Bakersfield, so and you didn't see a lot of Punjabi, but you still experienced like how it is growing up in a typical Punjabi like community, right? So
Yeah.
I just wanted to say like the typical like challenges that I've seen like right with the core is like they're usually put to the back burner, right? Like being a male and a like being a man in and like Punjabi cultures is usually more like favored. Like they'll be openly brought into circles that maybe
Oh
they're
yeah.
not like it's like all these type of things, right? They're usually more invited, they're more inclusive, they're
Oh,
always had more opportunities, right? For
yeah.
you, how are you able to overcome those things and become, especially like at UCI, like you said, the other two people that helped you create JMC there were also Gore. So like if you could a little bit talk about like how that journey came to be, how you came to become, because it's always about confidence and how did you build that confidence and what gave you strength to become that, right?
Yeah, 100%. And you touched on so many great points. I feel like from the beginning, like from the second I was born, I immediately felt those patriarchal and misogynist structures that have been at play that you mentioned, so deep rooted within our community. And unfortunately, it's just ever present. And so I'm glad that we're having this conversation to really kickstart and hopefully just encourage other folks to have these conversations within their homes. And I guess for me personally, it started the day I was born. I much later, once I was actually aware of, hey, what day was it? So the day that I was born, Appa, like, "Ki karte si, sare jane kitthe si," where was everyone? Like, what was everybody doing? And I come to find out much later in my life that my daduji actually cried when I was born. So for a little bit of context, I'm the first grandchild on my dadke side, on my dad's side. And so, granted, a lot of everybody else really, really ecstatic. They were super happy. But for his oldest son to have a daughter and that his like, his first grandchild to be a girl was devastating for him. And so I think once I found that out, it was disheartening. It was like, what? Like, why? why does my gender define who I am or what the trajectory of my life will be? Like, I will be successful regardless of my gender identification, whether it's non-binary or, anything else. And so that was discouraging, but and I think growing up, it's just you're um, constantly you're facing all of these uh, barriers, all of these sorts of oppression,
Yeah.
or different sorts of oppression that just really put you down as a god. I mean, when I was younger, we would tie rakhi on our brothers, and within the past 3 years, I've stopped. And it's been very, very hard for my family because they just don't understand why. And they don't understand that it's deep rooted patriarchy, that there's sexism there, that, yeah, they give me laddu and passive, but that's not really what sustains a relationship, right? Like,
Yeah.
um,
Totally.
and so, and this like glorification of, oh, thade praya, like, I'm sorry, that doesn't mean much to me unless they've treated me right with respect. And um, so I think in terms of that, like, how it's just this saying that respect it just can't be given, it has to be earned. And for me, growing up in my life, I really had to combat, like, with other, or not really fight, but fight, we can use that word, fight with other like family members that,
Yeah.
like, no, if you're not going to respect me, I'm not going to tolerate anything less than how I should be treated, less than the best. And that confidence really truly comes from my parents, and they always encourage me to be like the best version of myself. There are, of course, like ways that they have their own internalized patriarchy and misogyny, and these the colonized mindset in
Yeah.
some ways. But for sure, like, I'm very, very blessed that, like, Vaheguru gave me very understanding and, like, um very forward thinking parents, in the sense that, like, they know that, okay, like, when I was born, like, oh my gosh, it was so exciting for them, they have a daughter. And I think my mom always said too that, like, had they not had a daughter, like how some families will try until they get a boy.
Yeah.
My mom was like, no, I was going to keep trying until I have a girl. So
Yeah.
it was really convenient for her because I have one younger brother. It was him and I, and so it worked out perfectly. And I can say, like, growing up too, we were always treated equally. There were some things where it was like, okay, like, he's gonna do the outside, like bod like but we would always do like gardening together and stuff like that. I think I just kind of realized later in my life how, the expectations of, like, okay, purone aage, go in the kitchen, make cha or something. Like, those are little things that make me tick now.
Yeah.
Because
Totally.
because it's like I just realized, like, wait, वो तो room पे बैठा है game खेलता है,
Yeah.
like, wait, I was busy doing something too. Or, like, the boundaries sometimes can be overstepped, and those gender stereotypes or gender expectations are placed on you. And so now that I've gone to school and everything, I kind of am more aware of it. Whereas, when you're younger, I feel like a lot of times I didn't know better. I was just like, okay, cool, like, that's what we do. And um so I guess growing up too, like, with the sangat that I was around, it wasn't predominantly Punjabi folks, but the sangat that I did was surrounded by was always my family. So I was always surrounded by, the Sikh sangat, the Punjabi sangat, and thankfully, always going to the Gurdwara every Sunday and being surrounded by, family friends or sangat members, and being familiar with our community, but not to the extent where I could, like, walk to a Gurdwara. Um, so I think, like, in that sense, having, like, the everyday outside comfort of just, like, our community was something that I always craved. And so throughout high school, I'm still very much battling, like, my colonized mindset, right? This Western belief that, like, women should be a certain way, or the beauty standards that are inflicted upon us within the own household of, like, you should tie a kudi on your brother, even though that's, like, totally not a sick thing. um it's just one of those things that I think we have to constantly, like, pick our heads up. And my dadima was the biggest person, like, biggest advocate, who really made me, like, who I am today too. In addition to my parents, and addition to all of the strong women in my life, they, which you got to meet one of them. So my Gyanna Dadi,
Yeah.
she's my dad's mommy ji, and she's lived with us on my whole life. And the her story even inspires me every day. Her husband, my dad's mama ji, was unfortunately disappeared in Punjab when, during 1984. And her resiliency, her strength, and the fact that she's still like puts every day on with a smile, moves forward in life, and is always just so loving. She's the reason, one of the many reasons why anytime I face something, is like, okay, I can overcome this, and I won't let it tear me down. And then my dadi mom was 16 to my dad's mom. When she was 16, she immigrated to England from India and got married to a stranger. And you know how it was back then. Boston,
Yeah.
actually, she was really lucky to even see a photo. But it was funny because I love my Daduji so much. He's like, now I'm his favorite. So contrary to like him crying the day I was born, now he loves me to bits. And I think eventually everybody realizes that like women carry so much power and they're like amazing in so many different ways. So thankfully I'm glad he realized that. But I think he also, just with my dadima being such a strong presence in his life and so powerful, she influenced me, my puaji, my chachiya, my mom, and everybody else in our life to just be the shidni. And so I always talk about her, um, and her strength, her power. Um, and so like one of her brothers was, disappeared in Punjab, and she still overcame it. And then she lost her dad at a young age. She was 7 when he passed away. So she was raised by a single mother, and my Bibiji was a total, excuse my language, badass. So she raised 4 kids all by herself in Punjab.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, I really don't know even
Yeah.
how like she did it. I
Yeah,
think
it's like especially like how it is like, and especially in Punjabi, like when we talk about like Punjabi culture being like this like it is how it is, right? It's how it was built. It's how it's been for our parents and before. But
yeah,
like to say that like it's like you might say that like that's, but like in some aspects that stuff translate to how American culture is also. So it's like, so it's not like it's just our culture where that things happen. It's also implemented into in multiple like here also in America. But to like going back to like how she raised 4 kids by herself, like I can only imagine her family telling her each day like "ब्याह कर ला फिर, ब्याह कर ला फिर." Like it's like pressuring her to try to get with like a man, like trying to get her with a husband again, like trying to be like, you can't do this alone, you can't do this alone. Like, and the fact that she did do it alone just shows how much like how much power and like how much confidence and how much resilience like Gores in our community have. And it's
yeah.
just like to put that like, to put that potential and that leadership and that those people on like on the back seat on the back burner is so, it's like a waste of, it's just a waste, right?
Mhm.
It's like instead we should be pushing them forward. We should be promoting Gores to be like, hey, you should be able to go do whatever you want to set out to do, right? Shouldn't
Yeah.
be like, oh, you have to listen to whatever they say or whatever your parents say, or
Mhm.
maybe what if like your husband doesn't agree with it? Like who cares? Like honestly, like who, like I don't understand, like honest I don't understand that thing of like your life dictates on how somebody else tells you how to live it. And this is like going back to prime example of how your baby, like she raised the 4 kids by herself. It's like it's not like impossible. I feel like it's almost seen apart, like if there isn't like a man, like if there's no, if it's just a woman by herself, like she can't do it. And I'm just like, who came up with this stuff? And it's like, and it's almost like it's been built, and it's like if you look back in history, right? You look back in Sikhi history, you see so many Bibia and so many like, or they gave up. There's so many stories of them giving up their own lives
Mhm.
when like like the men didn't want to give up their lives, right? The
Yeah.
classic story is when like one of the stories, I might, again, I apologize if I get anything wrong, but if like from what I've heard and what I've heard all these years is like there was a classic story of, I forget the BB's name, but the Sikhs had abandoned Guruji and they were going home. They said that we didn't want to fight with you no more. You're not a guru. They had basically disowned him, saying that like we're done, right? We don't want to fight no more. And
Mhm.
when they came back home, the BBG was like, what are you guys doing? How are you guys gonna abandon your guys' own guru? Like, how you guys can't do this, right? So she, along with the others, she went to the Guruji and she was like, we're here for you. We're and like that's like those types of like powerful stories are already in Sikhi. And so the fact that we got away from those type of things so
Mhm.
quickly, and
Yeah.
like the classic thing is, right, like there's also we've always talked about this, right? There's always this Punjabi culture and the Sikhi culture, and I don't know how it became to where they're two separate things and they're two separate cultures, because they're the same people that we're talking about. Like it's like it's almost hand in hand of how the how we started and how we people are. Like I don't like the phrase when people say that, oh, that's not part of Punjabi culture, that's part of Sikhi culture. If that's not part of Sikhi culture, that's part of Punjabi culture. I'm just like,
Mhm.
why are we like like identifying other things to being who we are and what we not are? And it's like those types of things is like, it's been time. It's not something that just happened yesterday, right? It's been years and years and years of where we got to this path where we're going in two separate directions of where like where Sikhi was supposed to take us and where people are going today. And it's like those types of ideals go back to how core empowerment and how we can like these little things, and like this is a big thing, right? We get all got away from putting our BBM forward, being like they're independent. Like the core is like it was supposed to be singing core are supposed to be two, like there's no supposed to be no differences, there's no supposed to be no caste, there's no supposed to be separation. It's just supposed to be two identities of a whole big culture, right? And a whole big gom.
Mhm.
And it just we got away from those type of things and just like why and how. And it's like throughout time you can look back and see how it happens. It's just
Mhm.
like a little bit, like little changes and just like going out, going out, going out. It's like it just and the classic line is like it's just it is what it is, right? It's just
Yeah.
how things are. And I'm
Diamond
just like,
yeah.
it's not how things were. It's
Mhm.
just how things are now, and it's just like why do we change? And so it's like stuff like that. It's just where it gets to a point where it just like doesn't make sense, right? It gets to a certain point where it just doesn't make sense. But
Yeah. I think a big contributing factor to that too is like the Westernism that's like really just seeped into, I mean, whether it was through the British that imperialized, India, and then also we have all these other calculated forces that are trying to disenfranchise communities, that are trying to oppress the Sikh Sangat, and these cultural divisions that we so claim that are like, oh my gosh, like alcoholism, like you all just had a podcast on alcoholism, and how that has really affected our sangat as well. It all just goes hand in hand, the oppression, the ways to dismantle our community, to really beat us to a pulp, to where like we just disassociate with our itias, with our history. It's really just, I guess, calculated in the sense that they are attempting to, and whoever they may be, you all can like read between the lines. um how are they trying to ensure that we are
yeah,
decimated, right? Like,
yeah,
how can we calculate, or how can we devise a plan to really just ruin everything that this community might be? And
yeah.
Punjabi, not everybody from Punjab is Sikh, right? So
Exactly. Yeah,
there,
I wanted to clarify that. I didn't want to say that every Punjabi is Sikh and every Sikh is Punjabi. It was more about like how once we started, it was like Sikhi was very deeply rooted in Punjab, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm,
it there wasn't back then. It wasn't this culture shock. It wasn't supposed to be that, oh, you're Punjabi, oh, now you have to become a Sikh, which is a whole different thing. It's not
yeah,
that's by any means that's not what I meant when I said when I try to catch myself when I try to say like Punjabi and Sikhi culture are one. There are a little bit differences, right? Punjabi is more of a state where people come from, and Sikhi
mhm,
is more of a dharam. But
yeah.
again, they used to go hand in hand when they were first created, and that's what I was trying to say. If by any
Yeah.
means I didn't want to make it to where only Punjabis can be Sikhs.
No, 100%. And I think it's good to know, because I think the point, correct me if I'm wrong, that I was like interpreting from your point was more so that Bahan Nabarm done that, right? Like, we can easily blame why we aren't putting boards on the forefront based off of the fact that, oh, it's just our culture. That's
Yeah,
just how it is. And which it's completely not. And when you look into Sikhi and all of our history, it's not that at all. And in fact, we champion women leaders. We have so many powerful Kaurs in our presence currently and in the past. And I'm really, really honored to be a part of the Jakara and the planning that went into last month's Women History Month, where we dedicated the whole entire month to events centered around Kaurs and uplifting and empowering. And the amount of sisters and Kaurs that I met through those events throughout the month was just beautiful. Like the sisterhood that was built, just mind-boggling. And it just, I think throughout every conversation, I've just realized that many of the Kaurs really experience the same things. We all experience many similar situations, and it's disheartening to know because you as a Kaur think, okay, I never want another woman to go through this, and it ends with me, and this is it. This is the end of this toxic cycle, right? But unfortunately, we still have so many women who are being oppressed every day, and it's in
Yeah.
the most minute or like the smallest
Yeah.
ways, those microaggressions. And it constantly, it's a fight between um, which battles should we fight.
Yeah.
And okay, if we do say something, what's going to be the result? Am I going to just be viewed as aggressive? Which, who cares if you're viewed as aggressive? But it's been so ingrained in us, and
Yeah.
we've been trained to believe that women have to be these small, timid, very shy and quiet women, where I don't know, I just can't. I throw
Yeah.
that complete idea out the window and honor any Kaur who, obviously not everybody has different personalities, but if you if you are going against what is natural to you and due to somebody else's demands, then honestly, like we have to empower each other. We have to ensure that we're creating these safe spaces. So I'm really glad that we're having this conversation, and thank you so much for creating the space for core voices to be amplified and sharing my a little bit of my personal story and whatever all the other cores might go through. It's really important to be inclusive as a sing. It's so important to be an ally, and I'm very, very happy to say that I do consider you an ally. Before, when we were like just catching up, I mentioned the same thing. Like, not every sing makes a woman feel safe, and
Yeah.
not every sing is an ally. But people like you, Gurinder Paul, and I hope many can look to you as an example, to really just understand, how can I be an ally? How can
Yeah.
I improve myself and be there for Kaurs? Like, we don't need you as a crutch, but we
Yeah.
would
Exactly.
like for the space to be created so that we can also flourish. I always say to my mom that if women were to take over the world, this world would be a much better place. But also, women and our allies.
Yeah.
I mean, women's rights are always up for debate in the U.S. courtroom, and across the world. I mean,
Yeah.
women now in France can't wear hijabs. Like, it's just, it blows my mind, how like this neo feminism and this white feminism claims to be, in the name of like women and women's rights, but then it's not intersectional, right? So
Yeah.
we always try to ensure that our feminism is intersectional and that we are combating any kind of misogynistic or internalized misogyny, like the
Yeah.
misogyny or oppression that comes from women. And it's so ever present. Like, I've had other women tell me that my legs look like an ape. Like, excuse me, but Vaiguru gave me this case and I'm gonna embrace it. And it's such an it's such a huge battle every single day, having to combat these ideas of what a woman should look like and what our body should look like. Because quite frankly, I never see this kind of critique with men.
Yeah.
Like, there's never like, oh mota hai. I always hear, no, 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 oh jadi moti hai, byah oda hai, like kidda hona hai.
Yeah.
Why does everything have to be centered around a woman's body and her size and their like whether she's going to be able to get married or not? Like, again, like, a man doesn't define her power. And so I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because
Yeah.
yeah, it just blows my mind every
the
day.
biggest the biggest thing, like, I want to say, like, as an ally, right? If you are single, if you want to be an ally, if you are a male, if you want to be an ally, the biggest thing you can do is take a step back, right? Let them have that space. You don't have to be in the center of that space or be involved in the space every single time anything's going on, right? It's like just knowing when to step back, knowing when to not put in your 2 cents every time you have to say something. Just like those little things are such a big factor, right? Uh, I thank you so much for like everything you shared, because
Oh,
like one of the next things that like I wanted to like actually talk about was like how to build these safe spaces, right? And you did an amazing like job right now already answering that kind of and talking about that. And like it's just knowing yourself and knowing your spaces, being in those spaces. I feel like it's just like you said, like just being around other Kaurs is uplifting, right?
mhm.
Seeing other Kaurs how they've dealt with their, like especially your BBG raising four kids, and even your dad's mommy, right? It's like all these, like you see these previous examples and you take that and you build yourself, right? You don't have to be this person where you shove people out your way and you push people down to raise yourself up. No, you want to do it. You want to build yourself up from other people, and you want to build yourself up from yourself. You don't, like the biggest thing, right? When I hear about when women are trying to fight for equal rights or trying to fight with for any rights, honestly, is like, oh, what about a man? Like it was like, when did we ever disclose that a woman is gonna push down a man to get up? Like this is, I'm sorry, but like that's never been the case of
Yeah.
this whole discussion, right? That's never been a point. It's never been like, so it's okay for you to hold them down, but if they want to come up, do you think they're gonna pull you down and throw you on the ground? Like no, that's not how it is. They just don't want to be put on the ground, right? And it's like these, like those type of like excuses, like we've talked about the excuses, right? Like this Punjabi culture becomes an excuse for
Yeah.
anything to do that's not Sikhi related, to be like, but it's Punjabi culture, I'm a Punjabi though, so I can do these two things, right? Because like one of the biggest things when we were talking about our last episode about alcoholism was like a lot of people look nowadays, especially here, like in outside of Punjab, even in Punjab, like it's like people grow up around alcohol, right? It's not something that it should happen or anything like that, but it is a fact, right? It's just how it is. And so it's just it sucks to see that, like, and it's like the classic excuse is that like, oh, he's doing it, oh, he's doing it, or that person is doing it, or that person. It's like it's a culture based thing, and you think just because they're doing it, it's a culture thing and I can do it, which is not true. It's like you have to not use these things like as excuses, but
Mhm.
be a part of this community and try to make it better, instead of just being like, oh, but that's what's been going on. Maybe what's been going on is wrong. And you
Yeah.
need to recognize that, right? That's the biggest thing, is recognizing. I feel like that's one thing that a lot of people don't do. Recognize the space, recognize what's going on, recognize what's going on around you, right? Don't just be told what is going on around you. Recognize, see it for yourself,
Yeah.
right? Just like I don't understand sometimes when again, like I'm so like when you talked about how your dadaji, like when you were born you cry. I've had family that was like they were crying for days just because a girl was born, and I'm just like, why? Like what? I don't understand this. Like just because now that family knows that you had a daughter, or that family knows you had a daughter, like who cares if they know you had a daughter or you had a granddaughter? Like I don't understand like why that's a psyche that we put in. And then like I can already hear what somebody's gonna say to, if they hear this. This is what they're gonna say. But that's just how it is. I ਏਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਆ, ਏਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ, like like, and the biggest thing, right? And this platform has been made for this exact reason, is that like as being part of the younger generation, being part of the generation that has to grow up here in America and might not know how living in Punjab or growing up in Punjab is, right? ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ, ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ, right? And that's the biggest like thing I always hear from the older people whenever I try to speak, or whenever even when a core is trying to talk it, ਏਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but like how it's going, or how you think it is going, sucks. I'm sorry. Like, excuse my language here right now, but like that sucks. Like, I don't know what you like. Just because how that's how things were doesn't mean that it's going right. Like, that's not how things work. Like, change is constantly happening for the betterment, not for the worse. And if you don't want to change, then you're just holding back, and you're actually holding, and you're going backwards instead of forward, right? Sorry for my kind of rant, but I just feel like it's like those type of things, like these type of things, is like really is where I get mad and stuff like that. So
Oh, don't get mad. Actually, sorry. I would say actually keep getting mad because because in order for us to create any change, I feel like it is okay for us to be fueled by anger. Personally, for me, I'm fueled by anger sometimes. Like that's okay. It's a completely natural feeling. It's just how we harness it and how we take control of what we do with that anger, right? Like, are we going to cause harm, or are we going to cause, some good in the world? And for me personally, like, you brought up a lot of like the generational issues, right? Like how people will argue that, okay, well, it's just been like this forever. Well, I mean, not really.
Yeah.
Actually, not at all. Alcoholism is a very something that's popped up within the past 3 generations, and maybe 4, if we're being quite generous. But before that, no, not really. And so now it's been ingrained in us, and we have to be very cautious and try to evaluate, like, where is this coming from? Where has
Yeah.
this been suddenly implanted in our culture? Is it the music industry? Is it, because there are definitely a lot of songs that I mean, one comes to mind is the Jazzy B and Miss Pooja song, like Mitra da Boot or
Yeah.
something,
Mm-hmm.
where he's really like saying that, like, everything you have is just the cost of my boots, and like just putting a woman down. There's so many different songs that I can quote to say, like, okay, yeah, women are not as important, like, the casteism that comes to play, and this belief that, like, I can hit a woman, she spoke at a turn, and I can personally, like, share too, like, trigger warning to all viewers, definitely have been hit in my adult life, and it has been traumatic. It has been a whole journey in itself, trying to navigate, okay, well, you know, how did this happen? And how is this my fault? The victim blaming, and trying to, assess, like, well, what did I do wrong? Is there
Yeah.
something that I could have changed? No,
Yeah,
no.
and that's one of the like the things like I know we've talked in length about Punjabi community and how we're not allowing and how we treat females, but like here in America, like it's somewhat the same, right? Whenever you hear a case of a brave woman coming out and saying that she was done wrong in some way, right? Maybe in some traumatic way. We don't, some people just don't understand how things can be traumatic for different people. Like the smallest of things can be traumatic for different people. And you don't understand that because you haven't been through it. But whenever something like that does come up, it's never that like we'll see like it's never about like okay, we'll listen to them, right? It's always about like, oh, even if it did happen, it's nothing. It was gonna be nothing, right? It happens all the time. Like it happens with celebrities all the time, especially when it's a male celebrity or like a man. It's like the backing for the male, the man comes immediately, right? There is no second thought about like maybe he did do it. No one questions that, right? There might be that small population that maybe like we'll just wait and see what comes out to be, but nobody believes the like the woman that might have spoken out. No one believes her off the bat, and that's so saddening to see. And it's happened not once, not twice, not 3 times, multiple times, many, many, many times, where like when a brave woman finds the courage to talk. And the reason why a lot of women don't talk and stuff, the reason why years later some people might talk, or years later multiple people may come out and say something, is maybe because when it did happen, if they did say something, they know instead of getting help or getting into a space where they might get some closure or get some justice for something, they know that they're just going to get battered with all this abuse, all this talk on social media being like, you're lying, or that didn't happen, or just move on. And it's like those type of things are just like,
Yeah,
just to point out, I'm just like, that's so wrong. And it's just like,
it's heartening. Yeah,
and
100%.
and I've also seen it the other way around. When if it ever happens, when a woman does wrong to a man, it's immediately the man is supported to being like, oh, why did she do that to him? Why did she do this? Why did she do that? It's always questioning the woman why she do what, but like when it's the flipped of the tables, no one ever questions why the man maybe have done it or he possibly did do it. It's none of that. It's just being like, why is she speaking?
Yeah, they're always behind it, right? Like
Yeah.
it's either, oh, they weren't in their right mind, or they drank a little bit, or you made him really angry, or whatever the bahana might be, right? Whatever the excuse might be. And even having to hear afterwards, like, tu jada bolya, tayo ne thanu marya, right? Like, you spoke too much, you shouldn't have said anything, that's why he hit you. or bande iddaਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ. Men just do that. What? I'm sorry, because if men just do that, then I don't want anything to do with men. You know, like it it's very difficult to hear those things when you in fact have like gone through that, and you're just like, you have to take this for surface value. This is how my life is going to be. This is how the world is going to perceive me as a woman, somebody who can be abused, somebody who can be battered. No, that's not acceptable. And I think and I'm very grateful Vaheguru has blessed me with a very, very great life. But every instance or every occurrence in my life where I've had to face any kind of misogyny, patriarchy, sexism has built a lot of character, has, molded me into the human I am today. And I'm very, very grateful for that. So, any kind of trials, tribulations, I'm grateful that we shouldn't have to go through it. That's one thing. But I can personally say, like, through time, it builds a lot of character, in the fact that, or not builds a lot of character, but builds my, thickens my skin in a way that it shouldn't have been thickened, but makes me more aware of the world, and it empowers me to empower other Kaurs, because then I can take my own story. I don't share stories out of pity, or like, oh, I need this sympathy or something. I share it because other women are experiencing the same things, and they're being dismissed in many different ways too, or their abuse is even more extensive, and it's still being dismissed, and there's still excuses being made for certain people, our oppressors, right, our abusers. And so it's really, I think, a really important topic to just be a little transparent about. For me, I've battled with sharing things, and the older I get, the more I realize so many women go through it, and it's disgusting. It's disheartening. It's honestly quite literally soul shattering to think that multiple women have gone through it. I mean, even the statistic for rape is insane, and I can't remember the statistic off of the top of my head, but I just remember that it's alarmingly high, and I think it's like something in 8 women. So regardless, just like very, very difficult. But I want to go back to what you mentioned too, like we might not have experienced the same thing that another individual goes through, so it's like, difficult to understand, but that empathy goes a long way. The empathy, the empowerment, the having just someone to like listen and to believe you, like you mentioned, instead of being like, okay, 2, 3, 4 times, no, that didn't happen, you're just lying, or whatever their excuse might be. I feel you on that. There's always just some reason as to why we shouldn't believe her and her story, and why the man is the bajara instead of an abuser. And oftentimes sorry, last point.
No problem. No.
I see this a lot where the individual, the oppressor, the abuser is very well liked in the larger community, right? Extremely, like, just, oh, inna changa bandaya, he's really good guy, he always helps everyone out. Oh, but he did something bad. Chal koi na, kadi vari hunda hai, ki vari it just happens, like, oh, forget it, no worries, it happens sometimes, we all make mistakes.
No.
Okay, 1 time, sure, we'll give the benefit of the doubt. 2 times? 3 times, that's a pattern, so it's trying to identify, like, and also going against what society is saying, right? Like, oh, okay, he seems like a really great guy to the rest of the world, he treats them all great, but how does he treat his wife? How does he treat his children? How does he treat other people, and that don't benefit him? So it's really just interesting to see. And I think that's like my biggest thing is also, if any of your guy friends, or I always try to say this is another way of being an ally. If one of your guy friends is accused of abusing, whatever it might be, it, don't question it.
Yeah.
Because even though he might be a really great friend to you, or even just like, oh no, like he would never do that. He's not like that. No, 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 no. If he wanted, if he wanted a girl, he could get her. He doesn't have to like, you know, go past consent. Um, no,
Yeah.
sometimes our friends are not who we think they are.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think
I
that's another,
totally agree.
yeah, I just want to say that's like another way of being an ally.
Yeah.
Just sometimes your homies are not who you think they are.
Yeah. And that's like a homie, like a friend, right? Somebody you might have grown up with, somebody you have personal connections with. I get it's a little bit more challenging to go through that process of maybe being like questioning your relationship, questioning all the time you spend. But
Yeah.
like the common thing that I see, right? Because I'm a big sports fan, right? So I'm in sport. I love sports. I love watching sports, multiple sports, right? And it's always when a sports athlete of like a player of a team, right, does something and something comes up about them, because there's this fan base for a team, and because they like the team and they don't want the risk of the guy leaving the team getting uh, they will make up excuses or they'll turn a blind eye just because they're a fan, their fandom of a team, and they don't like. Some people have personal connections with the team, I get it, like you might grown up from day one of your life up to, but there's still a certain point where you have to reflect and be like, no, that's messed up, or that's
Mhm,
wrong, or at
mhm,
least the biggest thing I hate, right? And it's like I hate this so much is when, again, when we talked about it, when somebody does step forward and no one believes them or if they put them down. How about you wait until a little bit more comes out to voice your opinion? How about you wait until you just before you just go and put their story down or just destroy them completely? Because no, maybe they're already destroyed. That's probably why they're coming out to talk about it. Maybe it's not because of money. Maybe it's not because of fame. I don't
mhm.
think a person that has traumatic, like is dealing with trauma from something, is the first thing is, how do I make money off of this?
Yeah,
It's
like
more it's more about they've been through something. They want closure for themselves, but they
mhm,
also don't want other women to go through things like that. And it's
mhm,
like that aspect of things is always taken away. It's always like she wants money, she wants fame. Why is she coming out now? Haven't you like there's I mean there's been stories of one man mistreating hundreds of women, and it didn't take until 10, 20 years later down the road to finally that guy gets some, like he finally gets caught up for what he's been doing. And it
yeah.
didn't take until 100 or 200 women to finally get to that point. And I'm just like, and we and so there's just like I just don't I understand, like even like you said, like maybe once or twice is like, even once or twice, it's I'm sorry, but once or twice by accident, something doesn't happen by accident. Something in your psyche
Mhm,
makes you do something because you, one, either you believe you're doing something, or
mhm.
two, that you can't non-consciously beat somebody up or non-consciously like rape like that's not non-conscious. I'm sorry, you're consciously doing the actions of what you're doing. In some way in the back of your head, you're thinking about what you're doing. I don't like this hearing this excuse of you're non-consciously doing all these things is a
Mhm.
horrible excuse. I'm sorry. You
Oh
can't
no, I agree.
mistakenly do
I
this stuff.
completely agree. Yeah.
I always hate
It's a
that
bahana,
excuse.
right?
It's always
Total,
a bahana. It's always an excuse, right?
total
Like,
excuse.
oh, he was drunk. I'm like, okay, drunk people still like because we had this podcast. Drunk people still have some level of conscious behavior. They still are these because the next day you might remember not everything that happened the day before, but you
Mhm.
still remember parts of it. So you are still consciously there, thinking
Yeah.
about what was going on step by step. Maybe you have blur spots in between, but still you still remember what you did, kind of lightweight, unless you're blackout drunk, which again we talked about it. It's not good for your health. Please don't do it, right? Please
Mhm,
watch yourself and please measure your drinks. Please drink responsibly and safely as you can. But
mhm,
it's just like those types of things, like those are not excuses. Like I hate those are excuses that are being made.
mhm,
And those
mhm.
are excuses not down the road that are made. Those are excuses right off the bat that are made for men. And I'm just like, I
Yeah.
can't. I'm just like, wow. Like it's just crazy that some people just can't wait to see. Maybe okay, let's just say maybe it was a fake story, right? Maybe some way down the line somebody did try to come out and try to make money, or but that one person doesn't define everybody else. Just because that one person might have came out a fake, you can't just be like, hey, she was faking it, so she's also faking it. She's also no, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, that's not how it works.
100%. And I think like we've touched on so many great topics as well. I personally can speak about or talk about core empowerment like for hours and hours and hours on end. But thankfully, Jakara doesn't stop, and we always have programming geared towards like uplifting the core voice and trying to make it the most inclusive. Trying to create space, and so I just really want to say like thank you so much, Grinderpal, for creating this space. I hope that other sings can look to you to, hear the experiences of other floors and what they might be enduring. And, I personally always the way that I've tried to motivate myself and continuously um, persevere is always in Jaradikala when I root myself and in Bani and Sikhi in Artias I feel that assurance that it's gonna be okay and we are strong, we are fierce, we're magical. I mean, we literally birth little baby aliens. I mean, like we birth little humans like bache that are so pure, and I mean that's only something a woman can do. That's power. And I really just want to say thank you so much. And unfortunately, I know time has just dwindled and gone, but we do have, I do have to get going.
No
So,
problem. No, so I was just gonna wrap it up real quick, anyways. But
yeah,
thank you again so much for joining. Right? I mean, thank you so much for sharing. I know these things are not easy to share, so I'm so thankful that you were able to share.
of
But
course,
in
thank you.
in, in a little bit of concept about what Jakarta is doing to allow cores safe spaces, we do have core voices going on next Friday, April 23rd. You can find out more details on the JMC UCD IG, or you can also go on the JMC UCB, who is the JMC that's putting on the event, to find out a little bit more. It's more of a space where people can come together, especially cores can come together and just lay what they are dealing with on the table in many forms, right? Through poetry, through art, any way they want to express themselves, just to put it on the table and be, so they don't have to be burdened with this stuff. Be in a safe space where they can express themselves, right? That's the whole. I was able to make it to the UC Davis one that happened a couple years ago, and it was amazing to see not only just scores do all this, but also some sings also helping and being allies, just creating the space, right? I mean, again, I go back to my biggest point, just taking a step back is the biggest thing you can do to be an ally, right? You don't, like, somebody could have easily just went there and be like, oh, what about sings, why aren't you talking about sings? But like, that's not what the concept of it is supposed to be. We're supposed to make safe spaces for all of us, for different people at different times. So again, it is core voices. It's on Friday, April 23rd. I believe it starts at 6 p.m. But again, you guys can always go to our IG page or also go to JMC UCB's IG page and get more information there. If you do follow the Jakara page, I'm pretty sure we'll be posting about it there as well. So again, we are on YouTube. We are on all streaming platforms like Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple. So if you there's multiple ways to tune in, and we really appreciate you guys. The songs that we're creating here and just listening honestly means a lot for us. So with that, I would like to wrap it up. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.